Hi everyone, this is Amanda again, and I'm here to do a video on how to sew the medical gowns. Let's get started.
The first step will be to give our neckline a 1/4 inch rolled hem. I start by rolling and pinning at the center front and at each edge, then pinning from the center outward. While I'm folding and pinning the hem, I roll the fabric between my fingers till the edge curves nicely while also lying perfectly flat. The heat from your fingers will help mold the fabric to a curve. You can also twist and manipulate the fold as you are pinning in order to help it lie flat. This is what I mean by that. Once you are done pinning, lie the neckline down, make sure it is not twisting or curling at any points. Pin if you have to. I use a small square of tracing paper under the fabric at the start and end of a line of stitching. This just helps prevent the light fabric from getting eaten by the machine. It can easily be pulled off after, leaving the stitches unaffected. Stitch along the neckline 1 millimeter in from the folded edge. If you tug or pull while you are sewing, it will make the neckline twist and curl, so be mindful not to manipulate the fabric too much. At this point, you would also 1/4 roll hem the sides of the body along with the bottom edge of the sleeve piece. I don't have footage of this, but it's pretty straightforward. See, it comes off super easy. And look at that, we have a flat lying curved neckline. We want to prepare our arms by marking the seam allowance on our body piece. This makes our job much easier later on. From the end of the line cut for the arm opening, we will measure 1/2 inch past and mark a straight perpendicular seam allowance. Then mark the seam allowance up each side at the same 1/2 inch. The bottom will be a squared off seam allowance past the cut line. Mark the the same seam allowance at the top of your arm piece. This is the piece and side with the notch. With right sides facing together, the notch will match the line cut for the armhole. At this point, match our drawn seam allowances on each piece. And pin loosely. I've added pins to illustrate the 2 points where our drawn seam allowances intersect. We will be sewing along this line from the top corner to the bottom corner. Then, with the needle still in the fabric on that bottom corner, lifting the foot, we pivot our fabric and turn so both drawn seam allowances match. It's important when we're pivoting fabric to leave the foot up and the needle down in the fabric. Be careful to move any folded corners of fabric out of the way. We don't want to catch it in the seams. Sew this seam to the end. This is similar to sewing a square gusset if you're familiar with that. Now we want to do the opposite. Starting close to our already sewn corner, we'll sew over those stitches to the other corner, pivoting the fabric again to match those drawn seam allowances, and repeating the same process. This time there will be much more fabric to manipulate and to make sure is out of the way of your foot. When sewn, we get nice squared off corners. On the body piece, we want to carefully notch the fabric to allow it to move. Make sure to leave the arm piece unnotched. It is really important to cleanly finish every single edge, as this fabric will fray dramatically. If you have a serger, by all means you can use that for any finishing on the interior. I prefer to do a flat fell seam. To do this, fold over to one side and then under both sides of the seam allowance. Sew down 1 millimeter from the edge of the fold. At the lowest part of the arm side, or the armpit, you will have to do a little bit of fiddling and it won't look perfect. But as long as the threads are contained so they won't fray any further. Here you can see what this finish looks like from the right side and the wrong side. Next, we will sew the arm seam into the shoulder seam. Once we match our shoulder seams together and the wrist edges together, our back edge extends past the neckline 1 1/4 inch approximately. This is to allow the back pieces to overlap when the gown is being worn. I find it very helpful to pin at this point. After we have sewn this seam, we need to finish this edge. I'll show you again doing the flat fell seam and rolled hem on this seam allowance. Roll this seam allowance towards the back of the body. It is very important for us to clean finish all of our edges to prevent fraying. Along with extending the life of these gowns, the fabric is made from plastic, so if we can ensure that they are kept out of the landfill for as long as possible, that is good for the environment. For the elastic cuff, we want to overlap each side approximately 1 inch and pin. Using a wide zigzag, sew down each edge of the elastic to create a round cuff. I do this overlapped cuff to avoid a seam pressing against the wearer's wrist. This will be more comfortable to wear. Pin the elastic to the right side of the sleeve, evenly distributing half of the fabric with only 2 pins. Place the cuff elastic side down onto your machine. I put my arm through the sleeve to brace the machine while I stretch the elastic with my other hand. Zigzag stitch all the way around the cuff while stretching the elastic to fit the fabric. This produces a nice, clean, finished, and comfortable cuff. I give the bottom edge of the gown a 1/2 inch rolled hem. Finally, we have to add our ties to the back of the gown. The ends of the twill tape need to be folded and finished with a zigzag stitch. I found the trace paper to be very helpful in this situation. Each gown gets 4 ties. One sewn 3 inches down from the shoulder seam on each side. And one sewn 15 inches down and 4 inches in from the edge on each side. This allows for overlap of the fabric and cinching at the waist if needed. It is important to note that there's more than one way to do all of the finishing on this gown. If you find yourself doing something a little bit differently and it works better for you, that's completely okay.
Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please reach out on the Facebook group. I will try to answer any questions you have, and have a good day, you guys. Happy sewing!